Hi, everyone. Want to get started? So I want to welcome you to the 22nd Annual Christmas Lecture entitled Hamiltonian Past and Antiquity. Our esteemed speaker today is Don Knuth, who really needs no introduction since he's a wonderful pioneer in his field. He is the author of The Art of Computer Programming, which is regarded as the first and still the best comprehensive treatment of its subject, as many of you may know. He's created many important computer programming systems over the years. He has won the first ACM Grace Murray Hopper Award, the Turing Award, the National Medal of Science Award, among many others. And he's also a professor emeritus here at Stanford University. So without further ado, as I'm sure many of you are anxious to hear from him, let's give Don Knuth a very warm welcome.
Do you have that sheet of paper?
I don't actually. Yeah.
Hi, it's great to see a lot of old friends and new friends tonight. So every December for a long time I've been giving these Christmas lectures, but of course a lot of you know that today is quite special because I think it's the first time Stanford or maybe any university is broadcasting a live video in spherical 3D, so that people can, so that people who aren't here in the will be able to see all the 3D things I'm going to do. Well, actually, I was thinking of inviting some dancers to go off on the side. No, but I'm going to tell you. Well, I think a really cool story. Stories that haven't really been told before. Except I did a beta test last week at Brown University, and so now but anyway, for the people who are watching from outside, you want to do something with 3D. We did put some books on the floor. So below the camera, if you look down this way towards your feet, you should see that there are 4 books sitting there on the floor. Now, but for the people in this room, I have a tradition of, since it's Christmas time, of giving away books every year. So one per person, and you have to wait until I used to say the person who asked the best question gets the books, but that was too hard to do it. So 2 of the books are in Japanese, though, so that restricts. But people, I get extra copies of books when I'm an author, and I hate to just shred them, so I bring them to give them away at Christmas time. So anyway, those 4 books are there, in case anybody's interested after. Now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to tell you this wonderful story. Let's see where. Story, Stephanie. I still don't see the picture. Well, now some of you. Look, I've got to zoom out. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to. They made this really nice picture, so I thought we could use this as a tie. Okay. So now, okay. So some of you have found on the internet something that I posted. I don't know, some time ago. This particular file hasn't changed since April of this year. But every once in a while I wake up in the morning and I think of something that I want to write for a future section of the book that's going to come out later, and this is going to be section 7.2.2.4 of the volume 4B someday. As I'm learning parts of the story, I put it online, and there are 5 secret files like this that enterprising people who know how to find URLs can figure out. And you get paid for any errors you find in these, just like the real one. But so I'm going to talk to you about some stuff that's in here, and a lot of the stuff I learned in February of this year, other things in the previous year. But anyway, over the years, I've been learning that this idea that we call Hamiltonian paths certainly didn't start with Hamilton, and it didn't start. It started, 1,000 years before, more than 1,000 years before Hamilton. That's the story that I want to tell you tonight. At least what I know about it now. I couldn't wait for historians to go and do it, so I had to do the research myself, hoping that real historians will explore it further and tell you what the real truth is. But I'll tell you what I was able to learn with the help of friends who speak these languages that I don't speak. Now, so what about Hamilton, though? I was talking to Helen Quinn at the faculty party earlier this afternoon, and I said, I'm going to be talking about Hamiltonian paths, and she's a physicist, so she's, you mean the Hamiltonian? No, this is different. This is something he did earlier, right after he discovered quaternions, and he made up something called the Icosian game. And here's a picture of one of the 4 known examples of the Icosian game. Hamilton sold the rights to this puzzle for 25 pounds, and I don't think very many were sold, because otherwise there would be more copies available today. But so Hamilton got his thing out of it. But anyway, it's a beautiful thing. But the idea of the puzzle was essentially what we now call a Hamiltonian path. That is, you want to go through all the points of this network and hit each point exactly once without backtracking. And in his game, people would choose the starting place and the ending place and things like this. So now, when you look it up on Wikipedia, it'll tell you the Icosian game is to find a Hamiltonian path on a dodecahedron. A dodecahedron is, this solid that has 12 faces. That's what dodeca means. And so you might say, well, why did Hamilton call it the Icosian game? Because the icosahedron has 20 faces. So the icosahedron has 20 triangles, and the dodecahedron has 12 pentagons. Well, the answer is that these 2 solids are dual to each other. So an icosahedron has 12 vertices. It has 12 vertices and 20 faces, but the dodecahedron has 12 faces and 20 vertices. Okay, and so I got a picture of that actually in my notes, and that makes it perfectly clear. So here is your icosahedron, the triangles, 20 of them, and then dodecahedron, 12 pentagon. And so each vertex here corresponds to a face here, and vice versa. All right, so although Wikipedia says that Hamiltonian path is to go between the vertices of a dodecahedron, Hamilton described it as going between the triangles of an icosahedron. Which is, mathematically the same problem, but as you'll see, there's something really interesting here because of some. Well, I can show you something else before I go on. There's also something called the traveler's dodecahedron, which came out. So Hamilton did know about dodecahedron, and they had this other puzzle that is very rare. But you can find this stuff online. But here's what got me interested. Here's an image from Metropolitan Museum. Let's see, we go out a little bit. You can see this was online for the map, but let's look up close at this. This is a picture of an icosahedron in the collection in New York, and I happened to like to see a picture of it, and I said, "Wait, so here's an icosahedron. Look at what's on it here. We got well, this is a theta. Everybody can see that that's a theta, right? And this and here's what the way the Greeks wrote alpha, and here's a beta. You can see the B there, and here you can see the epsilon on the left there. And so I'm thinking, oh well, I can't see the other. I can only see 10 faces here, but if you look on the back, you can see alpha, beta. They're probably gamma, and delta, and then epsilon. And then after epsilon, you got zeta, eta, theta, iota, and it looks like this might very well be a Hamiltonian path on the icosahedron. So exactly what Hamilton was asking for. But of course I couldn't see the back, so I had to conjecture whether this would be true or not. But I got curious about it, and I found out that such icosahedra, this goes back, by the way, to Greco-Roman times. The dates are something like 200 BC through 400 AD, but it's probably 200 AD is most likely. And all of the cases where they do know the origin was somewhere in Egypt. But I found that there were a bunch of them, and I was taking a trip to London, so I wrote to the curators of the museums there that had copies, and so here's one that I saw. Let's see, we zoom out, way out. This is in the Petrie Museum of the University of London. You can see here gosh, anybody from England tell me what that coin is? It's one of these small, I think it's kind of a nickel, 5p. This one is, again, an icosahedron with, in this case, the letters are painted on. At the Petrie Museum, they had 3 copies. This one here isn't such a, it's in different materials, and you can see that here the letters are painted after being carved in. But anyway, this was a lot of fun because the Petrie Museum is in a locked room that's open, one day a week. And you write to the curator, and they they check you out, and then you give you special rubber gloves to wear. But I was able to handle this and play with these icosahedra, and sure enough. It was a Hamiltonian path. I could go alpha, beta, gamma, delta, up through the first 20 letters of the Greek alphabet. And not only was it a Hamiltonian path, but I can't help but say that it was kind of a thrill to do it. I mean, just having the object in my hand, I could imagine that the people, well, technically it's not very easy to make a icosahedron, so somebody had to spend a lot of time figuring out how to do it. But after they had it, I can imagine that they really enjoyed moving from triangle to triangle in alphabetical order, because there's something very appealing about it physically. As computer scientists, we get most of our thrills from bits, but actually every once in a while having a real physical object in your hand can be even more fun. Okay, so then but I also had written to the British Museum, which is a few blocks away, and the British Museum had also 3 examples of these icosahedra, and there I spent the rest of the day making some photographs that I could use in my book. So here's one. This is the one that I actually used in my book. It's the largest of the ones they have in the British Museum. I'll show you quickly the other 2 that they had. And this one is serpentine. The one in the book is called steatite, the material, and this is faience. And in every case, it had a Hamiltonian path. The British Museum also has a 4th one that isn't, does not make a Hamiltonian path. So of all the known examples of this kind, I would say maybe, I don't know, 70% turn out to be Hamiltonian when you look at all the faces, and the others are not. experimental error. But it's not a proof that the people at that time, did it. On the other hand, the fact that it is exciting to do that makes it plausible anyway. But I can also, by the way, show you some examples. These come from the Louvre and from Cairo. So there are quite a lot of existing examples. But now the one that I photographed, I included in my prefascicle, and so I'm going to zoom in on this picture here, and let you see these. So here I've done it from each of the 12 vertices. You can see the five. Go out a little bit. You can see the 5 letters around each one: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, and the next one would be epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, alpha, and so on. I just think it's a really cool coincidence that icosahedra did exist way before Hamilton came up with the notion that it would be fun to consider going along all the triangles of an icosahedron. So now I have an exercise in here, let's see, I believe it's exercise 9. And I will show you next. We'll zoom in on that. Let me see how this works. I want to make sure you can. I'll read it to you. It says each letter in the Greco-Roman icosahedron can be placed 3 ways within its triangular face, depending on the choice of the bottom edge, except that delta and omega are symmetrical. From this standpoint, the fact that pi and upsilon share the same bottom edge in the example from the British Museum is a little bit disconcerting. So redesign that layout for the 21st century. This is the exercise. So that in the first place, we're going to use Roman letters A, B through T to replace the Greek ones. Secondly, the bottom edge of the next letter is always obtained by going up to the left or up to the right of the current letter. And then third, it makes a cycle, so that when you get to the 20th letter, you come back, and one more step takes you back to where you started. Okay, so that is the 21st century version of the thing. And if we look at the answer to exercise 9, I show what such an example would look like. And in a sense, actually, Hamilton knew that the answer was unique up to obvious transformations, like starting the cycle at B instead of A, or going backwards, or taking a mirror reflection. So there's only one answer to this problem, essentially. And I said, well, it would be nice to own a 3D printed object like this. So at the beginning of July, I had an interesting letter in my mailbox. Wait a minute, from Krakow, Poland, and what in the heck was inside? And inside was this box. And when I opened the box, look what I found. Can you see that? It's black. You can't. Unfortunately, you can't read it here. I put it on the scanner so that you can see what a little bit what it looked like. And so here, there's a company in Poland that has just come out with a new kind of a 3D printer based on laser. The laser melts the powder, and it's called sintering, and somehow, even though I have no link to this exercise on the web, somebody there ran across the exercise and they saw that that I was asking for a 3D printed object. So they used this as one of the test cases, and you come up afterwards and take a look at it. But here, it's really fun. So here I have A, and then I go to the right, and I get a B, and then I go to the left, and I get a C, and I go to the left, and I get a D, and go to the left is E, go to the right is F, and go to the right is G. It just works. So I got so then I wrote back. So okay. As I said, if somebody finds an error in the fascicle, they get a check for it. So I didn't know who's responsible for this, but I wrote this check, and I said, what a wonderful surprise. Thank you for one of the best gifts I've ever received. When I wrote, it would be nice to own a 3D printed object like this, I clearly made a gross understatement. So the enclosed check is for correcting my manuscript. And so the next time, the author okay. All right, so that's the first of three stories I want to tell you tonight. This takes Hamiltonian past with high probability but not certainty back to maybe 200 AD. But now we can go with certainty to the 800s. And that's, so that's only 1,200 years or something. Yeah. But the next part of the story is where we get into the earliest known examples of Knights tours. Okay, now, anybody here who hasn't heard of a Knights tour before? Did you ever play chess? Okay, so anyway, the game of chess was invented about, I don't know, 600, 700 in Persia and or India, probably India. Cashmere, or anyway, somewhere, and it was called shatranj or chaturanga, depending on which country you are. But this was a predecessor of chess, and most of the pieces had different rules. I mean, the king was the same, and the knight was the same. That's the critical thing. But a lot of the other pieces moved differently. But anyway, it got popular, and in the year 842. There was a man in Persia named Al-Adli who published a book about shatranj, and he was the current world champion. And he included in his book a knight's tour. And now all copies of his, that's a long time ago, all copies of his book, long since vanished, but other people reprinted parts of it, so we can reconstruct a certain amount of his book from what other people quoted. And in particular, there's a guy who was Abu Zakaria Yahya ibn Ibrahim al-Hakim, so we call him al-Hakim for short. He quoted the Knight's tour that Al-Adli gave. And so this is a Hamiltonian cycle. This is not it's actually a closed tour on the bath. And Al-Hakim also gave another tour which is not closed. It starts, well, here's a picture of the Adli's, which is closed. And here's a picture of Ibn Mani's. And Ibn Mani, nobody knows anything about him. He's mentioned only on this one page of Al-Hakim's manuscript, and we tried to identify other people by other ancient people by that name, but it looks like the other ones were definitely different people. So these are the earliest known examples of Knights tours, and this one is dated 842. This one we don't really know, except there's good reason to think that actually this one was invented before this one, because it's much easier to come up with, and there's tens of thousands more Knights paths than Knights tours. It probably, this one being more primitive probably was an earlier conception, but that's it's only conjecture. Anyway, these are the two earliest ones, and all knowledge comes from a single manuscript of Al-Hakim's work. Now, Al-Hakim wrote 300 years after Al-Adli, and the manuscript is 300 years after that. So when you're looking at these old things, you're lucky to get information at all, and maybe there were lots and lots of other Knights tours and things written, but nobody nobody kept good track of them, and so some people thought that it was sinful to play chess and so on. So books get burned. But anyway, so I learned about this that there was this one manuscript that told about these tours. And so, there's a long story about the manuscript. I don't want to go into details, but anyway, at the beginning of like 1903 or something like this, Harold Murray, who wrote the definitive history of chess, and his father was the founder of the Oxford English Dictionary. Anyway, he learned of this manuscript that it was in the possession of Mrs. John Rylands, and the John Rylands Library in Manchester is one of the great historical libraries, and this manuscript at the time still hadn't been donated to that library, but Murray got permission to come and see it at her house, and he looked at it, and he knew enough Arabic to figure it out, and so then he wrote about it in his history, but nobody has ever republished the manuscript or translated it or anything, and so but I wanted to find out how in the heck did Al-Hakim describe a knight's tour? It must somewhere in his manuscript. Did he draw a picture of it? What did he what did he do? And exactly how does he know? How did he refer to Ibn Mani? Murray referred to Ibn Mani by 3 different names, and he wasn't that careful about his scholarship. So I wanted to check it out. And I thought I would have to go to Manchester in order to do this, but with somebody who could read Arabic. But it turned out that following the clues in Murray's book, and looking at an online catalog, I found that I could order a copy of the manuscript, and I don't know, it cost me $50 or something to get those pages copied. And my friend Kamal Mansour, who reads Arabic, he's an Egyptian man. So I brought the copies over to him so he could show me what it was. Well, it turned out it was the wrong book completely. It was something had nothing to do with chess whatsoever, so we had we talked to each other a little bit, but then I wrote back to Manchester and I said, "What are you sending me this?" So it turned out, they changed the catalog number of the books over the years, and so the book number I said had nothing to do with it, but I said, but I also gave you the title and all this. So finally I got. I've been going through all kind of bureaucrats that had me fill out forms and stuff to get the copies, and I said, "Look, I paid this money and I got the wrong thing, and what should I do?" So finally, I got to talk to a senior librarian there, and it turned out that they had digitized the darn thing, and it was already online, but nobody, and so they told me the URL. So then I could get the thing, and okay, well, I could go on telling about. This is a lot, but anyway, you get some idea as to how much fun it is to do. Try to look at source material. My major failing as a teacher was that I wasn't able to get a single one of my 28 PhD students to realize what a thrill it is to work on source material. But maybe one of you in the audience will get some idea. But anyway, here is the page that on which all this earliest Knights tours rely. So at the top of the page, it says something like, "Here's a way for the knight to kill everybody without leaving anything," or stuff like that. But then I zoom in on this particular. Here is a chessboard with Arabic written in it. The manuscript is Persian. I'm trying to learn what's on the screen here. You can see an 8x8 now? Yeah, okay. Yeah, the guidelines I have here don't match perfectly with what you can see. So all right. So now, but the key thing is that there's a poem down here, and well, I got some things written in the poem. So for example, this Arabic word here is the one that appears up in this corner. Let's zoom out a little bit more. So this one is here. The next word is this guy, and then this one is F6 is up here, and then the next one is H7, which is here. And so so in other words, here we've got a poem that has 64 words in it, and then by pattern matching, and of course, if I could read Arabic, it would be easier, because the pattern matching wasn't so easy. The handwriting is pretty atrocious, but I actually did it. I took Photoshop and made a big copy, and and little by little, I was able to match everything up. So this tour on this one is the one of Ali, and these 64 words are jump across according to a Knight's tour, and at the bottom it says this poem is housed according to the right path of the knight. Literally, it means distributed according to a knight's path. And then the one below it here is where it talks about Ibn Mani also having discovered a knight's tour, and this one is Ibn Mani's tour, the one that I think is probably earlier. And again, the same idea, but it's a different poem and a different path there. So that's the way. That's the way. This is the source of the earliest known Knights tours, which is a real, definitely a Hamiltonian path. So we got Hamiltonian paths traced back to the 800s. Now, but the next page of this Arabic manuscript, the flip side of it is this, which says, now here's another way to describe that the first of those tours, and now and here I've written a few things on here. So this is Arabic for first, and second, third, and there it says fourth, fifth. You get the idea. Sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, and then it goes into other things which apparently use an old notation that my friend didn't know. But this is clearly Arabic for 30. This is a 3, the way they write a 3 and a 0. Even though Arabic is written from right to left, they still write Indo-Arabic numerals the way we do with the Units digit at the right. So they actually thought of the Units digit coming first. So this is 40, and this is 30, and this is 20, and so on. So here was another way to give the tour. Instead of taking a poem and rearranging the words, they presented it as a matrix of numbers 1 to 64 in some old Persian-style numeral system. Okay, so that's like if we went to modern notation, then this would be this would be what that Arabic page does. Okay, now, as I say, some people have talked about this manuscript and saying, in general, on page such and such, there's a description of problems, interesting problems, and some of them mention that something about a nice tour, but no real explanation of the notation or anything, as far as I know, has ever been published. And I'm sure there's, somebody really looks closely into this manuscript, they'll find all kinds of other interesting detail. Now, you might say, well, why didn't they draw a path picture like this? Why didn't they do one of these things? Well, that wasn't invented until, as far as anybody knows, that wasn't invented until the 1700s, about 1750. There's a book, 1766, in Italy, about chess. The first time a knight's tour was actually drawn in this, this kind of a fashion. Okay, now let me then go to the third part of the story. So I've told you about the Greek-Roman part and the. Oh wait, no. Yeah, I guess that's fine. And so now let's go to the third part, which is about India. And so in fact, here we go back even earlier than Al-Adli, but it's not a tour of it's not a nice tour of the entire chessboard, but only on half of a chessboard, a 4x8. So the earliest known, this goes back before Al-Adli, but it's 4x8, not 8x8. And here's a knight's half tour. Okay, now on a 4x8 you can't make a closed tour. Every Hamiltonian path on a 4x8, it's not too hard to show, starts and ends at either the top row and the bottom row, but never in the middle. So you can't have a closed tour. If you could, you would have to have something that starts at top or bottom, but then the next move would have to be, or the last move would have to be in the middle. But that would give you a path if you took it backwards that doesn't exist. So anyway, this is the earliest known, and it's due to Rudrata, 815, and then there's another one just 15 years later. Ratnakara has this one. So we have, and now, of course, I ask the same question. How did these people describe their nice tours? They didn't draw a diagram like this. So what does the source, what does the source look like, and what more can we find by going to check out the source? Well, so here it is. This is a excerpt from Rudrata's book from 815, Kavyalankara, and it's the title of his book. It means Ornaments of Poetry, and at this time there was a kind of a cult in Kashmir of poets who would be hired by the Maharaja to be witty and entertaining, and they would write very amusing poetry. They would show their poetic skills by not only telling stories and things like that, but they would also do a lot of plays on words with their poems. And they had something called Chitra Kavya, which is picture poems, picture writing, and Rudrata was one of the very first, and certainly, as far as anybody knows, the first who took it so far as to use a poem to describe a knight's tour in a very curious way that I'm going to tell you about now. Now, but since not too many of us read Sanskrit, I'm going to show you in English what Rudrata's idea was. So let me show you a poem that I came up with that is a night's tour. Okay, so here I want a good time, lots of fun. No, not time so good. Now, not time. Foo. So now fun is lost. Time not good now, so time not now. I mean, let's face it, I'm not a poet, but in fact, I was thinking that instead of want, I should say vaunt here, because it sounds like a foreign accent. But anyway, but let me show you the idea of it. So you see, this poem can be read in two different ways. So I start here, and I want a good time. So want a good. Good. I can go down here too, can I? I see good. Then good time. Good time. Lots of fun. Okay, so let me go good. No, I'm sorry about that. Let's come down here. Good. Good time. And then lots of fun. Well, here I have lost instead of lots, but that's poetic license. So lots of fun. Okay, right? Okay, now not time so good. So now not time so good. Now not time. All right, here we are. Now not time. Foo. Okay. So. Oh wait, actually, there are two choices for so here. I don't know which one, but the next one is so in both cases. So I'll have to leave this. Okay. So now fun is lost. So now fun is lost. Lots. Time not now good. Time not now good. So time not now. So that's when I want to do the so. So time not now. Well, there we are. All right. All right. Now, that's the idea. So if so I had to have a poem there's 12 different words here, and I had to have a poem so that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 10, and so on. It's also equal to 1, 2, 3. Well, I don't know where the 3 was, but maybe here. Okay. So anyway, I have some pattern that 3 has to equal, this number, 10 has to equal this number, and so on. So there are various constraints. So I don't have 32 different choices here. I have instead only 12 left after equivalence. Now the thing is, it's probable that Rudratha only knew one Knight's tour on the 4x8, and the one that he knew allowed him only 4 different syllables. So the actual poem that he has in it, if we look at the Sanskrit here, is well, I guess I got an English translation at the right. So it's say na li na li na li na li la. Na li na li na li. Okay, so he only had 4 syllables to use there because according to his Knight's tour had this pattern 139, 23, 24, 11, 26, 16 has to equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 30 has to equal 2, 9 has to equal 3, 20 has to equal 4, and so on. You put all these things together, you find out that you only have you have 4 different equivalence classes that you can use for different syllables. So on the other hand, it turns out that this poem actually does mean something. I mean, Sanskrit it is much more flexible than English, that you can do wordplay more. It turns out that okay. You go into these Sanskrit poems. Sanskrit poems consist of groups of 32 syllables that are called shlokas, and so he found a shloka, a 32-syllable thing that had this property that you could read it in two ways. The shloka was to say na li 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 na na. So, the translation is something like, "I praise the army whose leader is mighty in play, which is devoted. I, who am not acquainted with untruth, whose men are mounted in cats and keep together in various vows, who does not perpetrate meaningless deals for his dependents, who has generals who assume the leadership of happy men, who has men of several sorts and no fools." Anyway, that turns out the meaning can be na 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 li li na na. Can actually do that in Sanskrit. So that's a wonderful thing. Now, how did people know that he was doing this? Well, they had a little bit of a clue, because in the previous verse he had given a rook's tour, where he had some more syllables that he could use. But anyway, here's what the Sanskrit actually looks like, and there's a commentator named Nami Sadhu, who was 300 years later, who explained what Rudrata was talking about. And a lot of these old Sanskrit texts, they consist of little shlokas. This is, I think this is shloka number. I think this is 19. Okay. Anyway, this. But then the commentator, who's writing 300 years later, explains what's going on in the sloka, and saying, actually this is a knight's tour, and it's very cleverly constructed, and so all this here was not by Rudrata, but by the commentator 300 years later, who's talking about all the different ornaments of poetry. And here's how the commentator explains it. I have here, here he gives 32 syllables, starting at my hand here, and then continuing along this vertical bar separates out the first half of the shloka from the second half. And so these 32 syllables, it is nonsense, but has the property that if you read them in alphabetical order, you get a knight's tour, or you get Rudrata's knight's tour. So here's what appears at the back of this edition. On the upper line are these 32 syllables that had appeared, and then if you read so each one is a different consonant in Sanskrit, and you read those in alphabetical order, which everybody knew. Then you would be following a knight's tour. So this was the way he explained Rudrata's thing. Now, however, nobody actually noticed that that's not the only knight's tour that matches this pattern of li, 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 na, 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 na. It turns out that the total number of knight's tours on a 4x8 is 62,176. And if you look at all of them, only one of them, and it's dual, have 12 different syllables. In fact, 1,700 of them are so. If Rudrata had only known them, he would have had to get to use only one syllable. It wouldn't have described much of a knight's tour. You could sort of say they did everything. But anyway. So it turned out that there are two different knight's tours, this one and another one, that both can be read in that way, and so nobody really knows what his original knight's tour was. And his commentator 300 years later, however, was evidently preserving a tradition that had been handed down separately. We don't have any printed evidence of it, but it turned out that the same Knights tour showed up several times later in different parts of India. So it must have gotten, the word must have gotten around. Okay, so that's the story of the very first one. But Ratnakara had a better idea. He said, instead of giving one shloka that you read in both ways, and so you only get a chance to use 4 syllables, I'm going to do 2 shlokas. I'm going to write 2 poems, and each one is a poem. But if you read the second poem in the order of the first poem, then you get a Knight's tour. So here's an example in English of what Ratnakara did. Okay, I'll zoom out a little bit. Can you see this? All right. Yeah. Okay. So now, okay, back to my thing here. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Watch each word here. I think that's what I do here. So, are you ready for this? Have some fun. Watch this or that word. Great 4 lines. Take out. Each gives 8. So on. Okay. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Watch each word here. Watch each word here. Or take some left steps and move 8. Or take some left steps. Some left steps and move 8. And move 8. Okay. Just right gives this black rook great fun. Just right gives this black rook great fun. Yep, I haven't used fun yet. Then have lines make out that white knight. Then have lines make out that white knight. Okay, there we go. So you can make 2 poems. Each one, is so that's Chitrakavya, and modern Sanskrit scholars frown on this. In other words, the reason that there hasn't been a great deal of scholarship about this is because they look at these poems and they say, well, it doesn't have much character development. It's not smooth. They don't get they aren't geeks. They don't understand the beauty of wordplay and how clever it was to do this. So so it's going to take a new generation, 21st century historians, to go through and find out the story. However, Ratnakara's idea was used also by other people, by other Sanskrit authors later. And so I'll give you a couple of, but first let me show you the source of Ratnakara here. I found this in the library at Oxford. They have a wonderful Indian Institute collection of things there, and well, of course, this page I could read. The next page a little harder, but the first thing you learn in Sanskrit is the numerals. So here's this is 22. You can see the 22 there. Okay, no problem. And then there's 1890. So this one is published. This is 1890. It's a little. You got to get used to the, the 0 is okay, but the 9 is a little strange, and the 8, wow. But numerals you get real easy because every page is numbered, so immediately you know what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Okay, so then here's the source where those 2 shlokas are. These 2 lines are the first shloka. It's number 145, and these 2 lines are the second shloka. And then here's commentary by somebody else explaining them. So here I'll show you blown up what happened. This what was on that screen, and if we rearrange the 32 syllables in a grid, this is what we find, and it's not quite a perfect match. Call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 32, and this would be 26, 11, 24. But 5 and 20 don't match the 5 and 20 here. Now, that's either because of a copying mistake or because of poetic license. But the other 32 definitely match perfectly, and when somebody's copying this thing and doesn't have a clue about chess and so on, it's easy to see that if you have to go through a noisy channel, then some of these syllables will get corrupted over a period of 1,200 years. Okay, now. All right, so that's so I jump another 200 years. This is King Bhoja, about 1050, and he has a work called Sarasvati Kantavarana, and this document is now online from Oxford, and there are 3 editions of this that I found in the library. This is from the 1880s. And I chose this one mostly because it has the nicest picture on the cover. And then here's a shloka and another one that give a knight's tour by Ratnakara's way, but the knight's tour that gives is Rudrata's tour. That's why I say it's known that Rudrata's tour must have been passed around by some other channel. And similarly, here's a work from 1313. This is by Deshika, and I'm showing here the Tamil version of his poem, the very famous poem, the Paduka Sahasra. It's a poem about the sandals of Lord Rama, and there's a cult that recites this poem every year and makes a pilgrimage and so on. In this particular one, the poems are given here, and then there's commentary in Tamil explaining that this is a knight's tour. Again, the same tour as Rudrata had. Okay, now I got one more chapter of the Sanskrit story to show you, and this one is something that I found that's actually digitized on the Internet Archive, and it is the Manasolasa of King Someshvara, the refresher entertainer of the mind. And King Someshvara ruled from 1127 to 1138 in Karnataka, and he probably wrote this early in his reign because later on he was involved with wars and stuff. So, but he was a very clever guy, and he wrote this quite a lot of interesting literature, and this is volume 3 of a kind of encyclopedic work of entertainments for intellectuals, and volume 1 and 2 were translated long before volume 3, because volume 3 gets into stuff that the translators have a lot of trouble with, like chess. And he had a brand new idea for how to describe a knight's tour, and in fact, he's the only one who gave it 8x8 tours instead of 4x8 tours. So here in India we have actually his tour, I believe, is the third. It is the third Hamilton Knight's tour on an 8x8 board. The other 2 coming from the Persian side of things. And so his idea in the Manasolasa is to give an 8x8 array for the chessboard, and here I've given an English version of how that would work. So each row you give a consonant, and each column you give a vowel. So, for example, ba, be, bi, bo, boo, ba, bai, bo, bow. Da, de, di, do, do, da, di, dow, etc. through sa, se, si, so, su, sa, sa, so. Boy, this is a tongue twister. So, okay, now, now he says, if you want to remember a night's tour and impress your friends, all you have to do is memorize a nonsense verse, and it's pretty, and it's pretty easy. It's pretty, the way the human brain works, you can do that. So all you have to do is, sa ni su nai lao fi bao de, fo bu di ba fe la ne so, and and you can learn that. And so, you can go down and write out your night's tour. Okay. So in Sanskrit, I got the page here somewhere to show you what it looked like. Somewhere must be okay. Well, Manasalasa. Okay. I vowed that I was going to keep these pages straight and be very systematic about how I did it. However, well, anyway, it's in there, and it's an 8x8. It's an 8x8 grid using Sanskrit consonants and Sanskrit vowels, of course. Okay, so that's the story about way back when how Hamiltonian paths were enjoyed by people who lived way long time before Hamilton, and there's a continuous history then through medieval times and so on. In India, there's a night's tour from the 18th century that shows interesting symmetry. That things that are 32 moves apart are antipodal on the board and things like that. So I really believe that we can justly call this the earliest the earliest graph theory problem for sure known to human civilization. It's the root of the people trace graph theory back to Königsberg Bridge problem in the 18th century, but no, this problem has a long, much longer pedigree, and I believe this is just the first time part of the story is told, and when people start looking more at these sources, then we'll find out a lot more about what went on. Okay, so thanks for listening. Any questions? Hi.
With the Sanskrit, I think your book in Japanese.
What now?
Well, with like the Sanskrit and all these different languages and like the connection, the Sanskrit language.
Right.
Like your book has it.
Okay. Is there a connection between Sanskrit and Japanese?
My question is, do you think computer languages should always be in English, or do you think computer languages should only be in English, or do you think kind of this connection?
There are nuances in other languages that you can't get, and conversely, there are things I can say in English that that people can't say well in French and Japanese and whatever. A lot of the languages that seem to thrive on the ambiguities that they have. A lot of beauty comes in not being precise too. So, like a computer language, when you're talking to a computer, you gotta you want to know what you're saying because the computer might blow up. But like natural languages take advantage of ambiguity in order to say things that are hard to say in other words. So no, I don't like to say that one language is superior to another, and it's really hard to. However, of course, I know that I'm limited because I can pattern match pretty much, but then it's fun to work with friends, and I can find something and point them to that page and say, now tell me about this page. And so it's fun for me to learn enough about it to get the idea of it. but it takes scholars and other people to interpret it, even even in English to properly understand Chaucer and Beowulf and things like that. Those are different. Those are different days. It's even hard to understand things from the 90s.
Given your success with the 3D printed object, what requests are you going to put into your next unpublished draft?
I got my actually, there's something I describe in Volume 3, which is which I think is the earliest object. The Earth example of a calculation that would take more than 1 microsecond on a modern computer, and so this is there's a cuneiform tablet that's in the Louvre Museum, and the author is Inakabit Anu, and I like the name Anakabit somehow. It sounds computery, but he computed a table of reciprocals in floating point base 60 arithmetic, and I talk a little bit about it. I wrote a paper about ancient Babylonian algorithms, but anyway, in order to do that calculation with the primitive things available at that time, and then to present these reciprocals in sorted order, which was a major task even today if I had a typewriter or something like that. So this tablet I think somehow would take a modern computer more than a microsecond to do, and it dates from about 300 AD. So it would be. I think a computer scientist would like to have one of these in a shelf, and it's Louvre AD 65. I forget the number, but okay. So that would be a nice thing to have 3D printed. The big one, though. It's about so big.
So you showed these shlokas.
Yeah.
The shlokas with the Knuths were kind of encrypted in them. What do you think the motivation would have been? Was it just to kind of have that kind of flexibility?
What was the motivation?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that that people like Rudrat and Ratnakar, they were showing off their brilliance. They were competing against each other. I can do a much more clever poem than you. And there's, I mean, if you look at this, they aren't only doing Knights tours. They're doing all. They're telling a story about battles, but they also have pictures of weapons and things like this. And so Knights tour was only one of the arrows in their quiver. So. And that was also their job. I mean, in other words, the best poet gets tenure. Way in the back.
So modern, tabletop games use these icosahedra with adjacent faces as.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all.
So modern tabletop games. Modern tabletop board games.
Modern tabletop board games
use these 20-sided dice with adjacent faces to count from 1 to 20. And what were these ancient, as opposed to
what were these things used for? Yeah, nobody knows for sure. There's no contemporary literature that says much. Although there's a text that seems to say there's one text that seems to say you choose a letter by lot, and so that meant that might refer to having some kind of a way to roll something and get a Greek letter, and that's in a document that describes divination. So it's something analogous to the I Ching in China, where you have in China they have ways of rolling of taking sticks and getting a hexagram, a pattern of 6 zeros and ones essentially, and then you can look up one of the 64 hexagrams, and then that suggests a concept on which you can meditate, or you can say, what's the answer to my problem, and then a little bit like a Ouija board or something like this. So it's possible that it was used for some kind of divination, but it's also possible that, as you say, used in a board game, whatever it is, it was hard enough to make icosahedron that they liked it. But some of these the museums usually classify it as probably dice, because they're also sometimes there's an example where there will be a cube and a dodecahedron and an icosahedron all in the same material and in similar style, and so a different number of faces, and so somehow they went together with a cube, and the cube looks more like a dice to me. But it's completely unknown, and it might have had some religious ritual associated with it. Who knows? Yeah.
One thing I wanted to follow up on is that if they're the adjacent faces, it's good for counting. But if it's used as a die randomly, then you might not want adjacent faces because if it's weighted.
That's right. If it's
offset,
right,
then it'll tend to get a higher.
You take our normal dice. You take our normal dice. It doesn't follow Hamiltonian path. You want the 1 and 6 are opposite sides, and the 4 and the 3 are on opposite sides. So 3 and 4 are definitely non-adjacent according to. Yeah. Right, but and so the fact that that had this pattern, I don't know. There's this undescribable pleasure that you get by going from triangle to triangle. It might or might not be a coincidence. I think it's probably not a coincidence because a large percentage of them have this property. Thanks a lot. Merry Christmas to all.
Hi, everyone. Want to get started? So I want to welcome you to the 22nd annual Christmas lecture entitled Hamiltonian Past and Antiquity. Our esteemed speaker today is Don Knuth, who really needs no introduction since he's a wonderful pioneer in his field. He is the author of The Art of Computer Programming, which is regarded as the first and still the best comprehensive treatment of its subject, as many of you may know. He's created many important computer programming systems over the years. He has won the first ACM Grace Murray Hopper Award, the Turing Award, the National Medal of Science Award, among many others. And he's also a professor emeritus here at Stanford University. So without further ado, as I'm sure many of you are anxious to hear from him, let's give Don Knuth a very warm welcome.
Do you have that sheet of paper?
I don't actually. Yeah.
Hi, it's great to see a lot of old friends and new friends tonight. So every December for a long time I've been giving these Christmas lectures, but of course a lot of you know that today is quite special because I think it's the first time Stanford or maybe any university is broadcasting a live video in spherical 3D, so that people can, so that people who aren't here in the will be able to see all the 3D things I'm going to do. Well, actually, I was thinking of inviting some dancers to go off on the side. No, but I'm going to tell you. Well, I think a really cool story. Stories that haven't really been told before. Except I did a beta test last week at Brown University, and so now for the but anyway, for the people who are watching from outside, you want to do something with 3D. We did put some books on the floor. So below. So I'm going to talk to you about some stuff that's in here, and a lot of the stuff I learned in February of this year. Other things in the previous year, but anyway, over the years I've been learning that this idea that we call Hamiltonian paths certainly didn't start with Hamilton, and it didn't start. It started, 1,000 years before, more than 1,000 years before Hamilton. That's the story that I want to tell you tonight. At least what I know about it now. I couldn't wait for historians to go and do it, so I had to do the research myself, hoping that real historians will explore it further and tell you what the real truth is. But I'll tell you what I was able to learn with the help of friends who speak these languages that I don't speak. Now, so what about Hamilton, though? I was talking to Helen Quinn at the faculty party earlier this afternoon, and I said, I'm going to be talking about Hamiltonian paths, and she's a physicist, so she's, you mean the Hamiltonian? No, this is different. This is something he did earlier, right after he discovered quaternions, and he made up something called the Icosian game. And here's a picture of one of the four known examples of the Icosian game. Hamilton sold the rights to this puzzle for 25 pounds, and I don't think very many were sold, because otherwise there would be more copies available today. But so Hamilton got his thing out of it. But anyway, it's a beautiful thing. But the idea of the puzzle was essentially what we now call a Hamiltonian path. That is, you want to go through all the points of this network and hit each point exactly once without backtracking. And in his game, people would choose the starting place and the ending place and things like this. So now, when you look it up on Wikipedia, it'll tell you the Icosian game is to find a Hamiltonian path on a dodecahedron. A dodecahedron is, this solid that has 12 faces. That's what dodeca means. And so you might say, well, why did Hamilton call it the Icosian game? Because the icosahedron has 20 faces. So the icosahedron has 20 triangles, and the dodecahedron has 12 pentagons. Well, the answer is that these two solids are dual to each other. So an icosahedron has 12 vertices. Has 12 vertices and 20 faces, but the dodecahedron has 12 faces and 20 vertices. Okay, and so I got a picture of that actually in my notes, and that makes it perfectly clear. So here is your icosahedron, the triangles, 20 of them, and then dodecahedron, 12 pentagons. And so each vertex here corresponds to a face here, and vice versa. All right, so although Wikipedia says that Hamiltonian path is to go between the vertices of a dodecahedron, Hamilton described it as going between the triangles of an icosahedron, which is mathematically the same problem, but as you'll see, there's something really interesting here because of some, well, I can show you something else before I go on. There's also something called the traveler's dodecahedron, which came out. So Hamilton did know about dodecahedron, and they had this other puzzle that is very rare. But you can find this stuff online. But here's what got me interested. Here's an image from Metropolitan Museum. let's see, we go out a little bit. You can see this was, online for the camera. If you look down this way towards your feet, you should see that there are 4 books sitting there on the floor. Now, but for the people, in this room, I have a tradition of, since it's Christmas time, of giving away books every year. So one per person, and you have to wait until, I used to say the person who asked the best question gets the books, but that was too hard to do it. So 2 of the books are in Japanese, though, so that restricts. But people, I get extra copies of books when I'm an author, and I hate to just shred them, so I bring them to give them away at Christmas time. So anyway, those 4 books are there, in case anybody's interested after. Now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to tell you this wonderful story. Let's see where. Story, Stephanie. I still don't see the picture. Well, now some of you, look, I've got to zoom out. Okay, yeah, I wanted to. They made this really nice picture, so I thought we could use this as a tie. Okay, so now, okay, so some of you have found on the internet something that I posted. I don't know, some time ago. This particular file hasn't changed since April of this year. But every once in a while I wake up in the morning and I think of something that I want to write for a future section of the book that's going to come out later, and this is going to be section 7.2.2.4 of the volume 4B someday. As I'm learning parts of the story, I put it online, and there are 5 secret files like this that enterprising people who know how to find URLs can figure out. And you get paid for any errors you find in these, just like just like the real one. But for the matter, but let's look up close at this. This is a picture of an icosahedron in the collection in New York, and I happened to like to see a picture of it, and I said, "Wait, so here's an icosahedron. Look at what's on it here. We got well." This is a theta. Everybody can see that that's a theta, right? And this and here's the way the Greeks wrote alpha. And here's a beta. You can see the B there, and here you can see the epsilon on the left there. And so I'm thinking, oh well, I can't see the other. I can only see 10 faces here, but if you look on the back, you can see alpha, beta. They're probably gamma and delta, and then epsilon. And then after epsilon, you got zeta, eta, theta, iota. And it looks like this might very well be a Hamiltonian path on the icosahedron. So exactly what Hamilton, was asking for. But of course I couldn't see the back, so I had to conjecture whether this would be true or not. But I got curious about it, and I found out that such icosahedra, this goes back, by the way, to Greco-Roman times. The dates are something like 200 BC through 400 AD, but it's probably 200 AD is most likely. And all of the cases where they do know the origin was somewhere in Egypt. But I found that there were a bunch of them, and I was taking a trip to London, so I wrote to the curators of the museums there that had copies, and so here's one that I saw. Let's see, we zoom out, way out. This is in the Petrie Museum of the University of London. You can see here gosh, anybody from England tell me what that coin is? It's one of these small, I think it's kind of a nickel, 5p. This one is, again, an icosahedron with, in this case, the letters are painted on. At the Petrie Museum, they have